A billionaire mother watches her silent, autistic daughter begin to smile. Not for money, not for therapy, but for a quiet janitor with a red, spinning top. What unfolds next will shake everything she thought she knew about healing, love, and fate. If stories of second chances, found family, and the quiet power of kindness speak to your heart, you're in the right place. Subscribe and join our growing circle of listeners who believe in gentle endings, healing hearts, and love that arrives when we least expect it. The girl hadn't spoken in 77 days. Not since the accident. Not since the sound of shattering glass and the stranger's scream folded the world on itself like an empty paper cup. Her name was Willa Hart, and she moved like a whisper down the marble corridors of Thornburg Academy. Small shoulders hunched beneath her navy coat, eyes flicking past light without ever holding it. She didn't cry. She didn't laugh. She simply floated. Outside, snow had begun to gather on the iron gate that wrapped around the school like a crown, thin, delicate flurries catching the eyelashes of early morning. Evelyn Hart sat in the back of a black town car, her hands resting in her lap, motionless. The windows were tinted, the silence padded with wealth. Even the heater whispered. Willa stepped from the building's entrance with her aide, a young woman who spoke gently but always too quickly, as if trying to lure Willa into a trap of conversation. Willa didn't take the bait. She paused beside the waiting car, glanced once at the vehicle, then turned her face away. Inside, Evelyn didn't move. She watched her daughter, absorbing every breath, every micro-expression, and yet still felt as though she was seeing her through glass thicker than time. She looked beautiful, untouchable, like someone else's child. And then the janitor passed by. He wore a navy uniform with a patch stitched at the shoulder, faded name threadbare, Jack. He carried a mop bucket in one hand, a duffel bag slung across his back. His dark brown hair was tied low, his steps soft against the wet pavement. Willa didn't flinch at his presence. She didn't move at all, but her eyes followed him. Briefly, Evelyn noticed. A flicker. That's all. The car door opened. Evelyn stepped out slowly, her heel boots crunching the snow that had barely begun to settle. She didn't approach Willa. She never did without asking, but something in her chest burned quietly. "Good morning, sweetheart." Her voice was soft, formal, like silk wrapped around wire. Willa didn't answer, but her hand clutched the strap of her backpack, just a little tighter. Her lips parted, then closed. The aide gently nudged her forward. Evelyn stepped aside. No touch, no pressure. She watched her daughter disappear into school again, swallowed by archways and echoes. The janitor was still nearby, now unlocking a side door. He didn't look up. Evelyn's driver cleared his throat softly, an invitation to return to warmth. She hesitated, just a second, then got back into the car, but her gaze lingered. She had never seen that man before. Later that afternoon, inside the quiet hush of the West Wing hallway, the one line with windows looking out toward the old garden, Jack was mopping slowly, as he always did. His movements were unhurried, rhythmic, like someone playing a song no one else could hear. A shadow moved behind the curtain near the reading room. He didn't react. He kept mopping. The shadow stilled, and then he stopped, reached into his pocket, and pulled out something small and round, red, chipped slightly on one side. A spinning top. He crouched on one knee, the mop handle leaning against his shoulder, and with a flick of his wrist, set the top spinning across the tile. It danced, humming softly against the polished floor, catching sunlight in its tiny orbit. The curtain twitched, then parted slightly. Willa stepped forward, just one pace. Her shoes didn't make a sound. Her eyes locked on the top, following its motion as though watching a flame in darkness. Jack didn't speak. He let it spin, then he stood, picked up the mop again, and walked away. The top remained. Willa stared at it for a long time, her lips trembling. Then, slowly, she crouched. Her fingers touched it, just enough to stop its motion. Her reflection shimmered in its glossy red curve. Outside, Evelyn watched the security footage on her phone from her office. She had requested access after Willa began withdrawing further last month. Just to feel closer, she'd explained to the headmistress, who understood more than she let on. The camera caught it all. The janitor, The spinning top, the silence, the stillness, and Willa's hand. She rewound it 3 times. Each time, something pulled tighter in her chest. That night, Evelyn sat alone in her penthouse apartment. The city's lights scattered like ash outside her window. The walls were white, elegant, untouched, as if nothing lived there except the illusion of perfection. A bottle of untouched Merlot stood beside a plate of uneaten risotto. Her phone buzzed with calendar alert. Charity gala, virtual meeting, Q4 review, all irrelevant. She played the footage again. And this time, when Willa touched the top, Evelyn felt tears rise without warning. She wiped them before they fell. The next morning, Jack entered the janitor's closet, a narrow space tucked between 2 storage rooms. It smelled of cedar and bleach. He unpacked his bag, hung his jacket, and opened a small wooden box on the shelf. Inside were tokens, a child bracelet, a photo of a girl in a blue dress, a seashell, a folded note with a heart drawn in crayon. He added the red top beside them, then closed the box. When he turned around, Willa was standing in the doorway, not close, not smiling, but there. He didn't say anything, just nodded once, then stepped aside to let her pass. She didn't move, but she did tilt her head, the first movement toward him, and then she looked up at the box. Jack understood. He opened it again and offered the top. She didn't take it, but she watched him spin it again on the shelf. It wobbled once, then found its balance. He smiled, left it spinning, and walked past her. Willa followed him into the hallway, 2 steps behind. Evelyn arrived at the school earlier than usual that day. She asked to speak with the janitor. The staff secretary blinked at her, confused, but she gave her a name, Jack Sullivan. Evelyn filed it away. Outside, she sat in the parked car once more, this time with the window cracked. Cold air moved through the space between her coat and collar. She held her coffee, without drinking it, and then she saw them, Willa and the janitor. He was crouched again, showing her something in his palm. Willa wasn't touching it, but she was leaning forward, toward him. Evelyn couldn't hear the moment, but she could feel it. Her daughter's shoulders weren't curled inward. Her head wasn't down. She wasn't afraid. She was curious, and for the first time in 78 days, Evelyn felt something rise in her chest she hadn't allowed herself to believe in. Hope, not loud, not triumphant, just real. Jack stood, nodded gently, and walked away. Willa stayed behind, staring after him. Then she turned, slowly, like someone emerging from water, and walked back toward her classroom. Later that evening, as twilight touched the edges of the city, like a fading ember, Evelyn stood by Willa's bedroom door. Inside, the girl sat cross-legged on the carpet, a red crayon in her hand, moving it in tight circles across a sheet of paper. Evelyn didn't enter, just watched. The crayon stopped. Willa turned slightly. Their eyes met, only for a second, but it was enough. Evelyn whispered, "I missed you." No reply, but Willa picked up the red crayon again and drew a spinning top. That night, Evelyn slept with the lights off for the first time in months. And in a janitor's closet 3 floors below the world's expectations, Jack Sullivan added a new drawing to his wooden box. The spinning top still hadn't stopped, and neither had she. The rain had arrived overnight, soft and unannounced, brushing the windows of Thornbrook Academy like the memory of fingertips against glass. It clung to the trees in silvery beads, soaked the brick courtyard until its colors darkened into rust and coal, and turned the morning quiet in a way even snow couldn't manage. The children arrived with umbrellas and soggy boots, their chatter muffled, their excitement muted by the sky's melancholy. Jack Sullivan moved through it as though he belonged to the hush. He walked the halls with a towel over one shoulder and a tool belt clipped around his waist, pausing every so often to tighten a loose radiator knob or wipe down a fog window pane. The hum of the boiler echoed faintly behind the walls. He didn't rush. He never did. Willa had started following him, not openly, never close, always at a distance, like a ghost still learning how to rejoin the living. She would stand at corners, peeking around pillars or watching from the library's open doorframe, small and unmoving. Jack didn't acknowledge her, not directly. He just made sure to pass through those spaces a little slower than usual, to leave the red top in her line of sight whenever he could. Sometimes, it waited for her on a windowsill. Once, he placed it at the base of a potted fern. It always came back to him, but never the same way twice. One morning, it returned in the pocket of his coat, a quiet surprise that made him still for nearly a minute. Another time, it showed up inside his lunchbox, nestled between a sandwich and a thermos, with a single pink crayon laid beside it like a secret offering. He never spoke about it, never told anyone, but each return was like a breath in the long-held silence of his life. Inside the staff lounge, the other janitors laughed over microwave noodles and sports talk, their voices echoing off the tile. Jack sat in the corner, sipping instant coffee and sketching a wind chime in the corner of his notebook. He didn't know why, just that it should exist. Later that week, he made it out of tin lids and stray washers, strung together with fishing wire, its gentle clinks like a lullaby made from scrap. He hung it outside the window of the sensory therapy room, just low enough for Willa to see it when the curtain stirred. She noticed, didn't touch, didn't speak, but she drew it that afternoon in charcoal on a scrap of math homework and tucked it inside the janitor's supply closet beneath his mop handle. He found it the next morning and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So he folded it into the pages of his notebook between two pressed maple leaves. On a Wednesday, Evelyn arrived unannounced. She wore a pale gray coat that draped like rainwater over her frame, her blonde hair pinned in a way that said she hadn't slept well. The principal greeted her warmly, but with curiosity. Evelyn politely declined tea. She wanted to observe her daughter in the environment where the change had begun. She didn't use the word change out loud, but it hung in the air like steam. From the observation room, she watched through the two-way glass as Willa sat cross-legged in the corner of the art room, quietly arranging buttons by size and color. Her therapist had given up trying to prompt interaction and was now simply sketching in the opposite corner, letting the silence settle. Then, from the hallway, Jack passed the door. He glanced in, didn't stop, didn't smile, but Willa looked up. Just for a second, Evelyn caught it. Later, as she exited the main building, she saw him by the dumpster, sorting cardboard with careful precision. Something in her paused. "Jack Sullivan," she said, testing the name on her tongue like a secret. He straightened slowly, wiping his hands on his uniform. His face was unreadable, polite but cautious. "Yes, ma'am." "She's different," Evelyn said. Since the top." He didn't answer, only looked at her with the stillness of someone who'd learned to carry too much in silence. "What are you doing with her?" Jack blinked once, then replied in a voice as even as winter sky. "Nothing she doesn't already want. I just don't walk away." Evelyn flinched, not because he was rude, but because he wasn't. His answer was honest. No manipulation, no agenda, just presence. That night, in her penthouse, Evelyn opened an old drawer she hadn't touched in months. Inside was Willa's first drawing, a crooked cat with one eye too big. She held it in her hands and wept quietly, her sobs absorbed by velvet cushions and floor-length drapes. She didn't know when she had stopped believing in small things. The next morning, she left the coffee by the mop bucket. No note, no explanation, just a small act, folded into the rhythm of the day. Jack found it an hour later. He stared at the cup like it might vanish, then took one sip before continuing down the hall. The ritual began. Each day a new small thing. Sometimes a warm biscuit wrapped in foil. Once, a folded napkin with a quote scribbled in pen. "Not all those who wander are lost." Evelyn didn't say it was from her. She didn't have to. She began arriving 10 minutes early, sitting in the car, watching. Sometimes Willa would linger in the courtyard after class, tapping her fingers against her backpack in a rhythm that mirrored the spinning top. Jack would appear from somewhere unseen, a corner, a stairwell, and Willa's posture would change. Subtle, like a sail catching wind. One day, she left him a maple leaf press flat between two sheets of wax paper. He added it to his box. Then, without words, began fixing small things around her, the wobbly chair in her classroom, the jammed locker door, each fix invisible, almost magical, like the school itself was reshaping around her needs. It took a week before Evelyn saw her daughter's drawing. A stick-figure man with long hair, beside a spinning top and a girl with a red scarf. It was simple, but unmistakable. "Is that your teacher?" Evelyn asked carefully. Willa didn't answer, but she added a star above the man's head. That night, Jack opened the old wooden box beneath his bed. Among its contents were memories of his daughter Lila, the last letter she ever wrote him, a photograph of her on the swing set, and the hospital bracelet he couldn't throw away. He added the drawing beside them, then closed the box with reverence. The following day, as he was repairing a broken faucet in the lower hall restroom, a small hand reached toward his tool belt. Willa, she didn't take anything, just tapped it gently, then stepped back. Jack straightened slowly. She held out her hand. Inside it, the red top. He accepted it like it was made of glass, his voice caught behind a wall of unspoken things. "Thank you," he said, just above a whisper. She didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. And in her silence, something shifted. A hinge unstuck, a thread rewoven. That evening, Evelyn sat on the stone steps behind the school, the rain finally broken by a hush of clouds. Jack joined her, without a word. They watched the sun bleeding through the haze, shadows stretching long across the basketball court. "She used to hum," Evelyn said, when she brushed her hair. Little songs she made up. I don't even remember how they went. And then one day, silence. Jack nodded, listening. "I tried everything," she continued. "Therapists, specialists, horse therapy, art therapy, sound chambers. I bought hope like it was for sale. And did it work?" Jack asked gently. Evelyn looked at him. Her smile was bitter and beautiful. She started following a janitor around instead. Jack's laugh was quiet. She started choosing. They sat there, two people from worlds that didn't touch, stitched together by a child neither of them could truly understand, but both had chosen not to abandon. "You lost someone," Evelyn said, not as a question, but an echo. "Yes." "Your daughter?" He nodded once. "Lila." There was silence between them. Not empty, just sacred. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Jack didn't reply, but his eyes shone in the fading light. As they stood to leave, Evelyn hesitated, then placed a folded napkin in his hand. This one said, "Things that spin don't always fall." The next morning, Willow was waiting in the hallway before Jack arrived. She pointed to the spot where he usually spun the top. He understood. He crouched, set it spinning, and for the first time, Willow sat beside him. Not across, not far, beside. Children passed. Teachers murmured. No one disturbed them. The top spun and spun and spun, holding its center, just like her. Snow returned like an old friend, gentle at first, then stubborn, blanketing the city in quiet layers of memory. By the second week of December, the ivy along Thornbrook Academy's walls wore a soft white coat, and the windows glowed like lanterns against the early dusk. Children pressed their palms to the glass during art class, whispering about sleds and canceled homework. The school buzzed with anticipation, the kind that danced behind the eyes but stayed mostly quiet in the halls. Willow was drawing again, not just circles or spirals now, but scenes, stories, moments captured with the fragile clarity of someone trying to tell the truth without words. Her favorite medium was scrap paper, math worksheets, old test backs, even a cafeteria napkin once, and her favorite subject was something that spun. The top appeared again and again, in meadows, on rooftops, inside snow globes, even once balanced impossibly on the wing of a bird. Jack found the drawings tucked in unexpected places, in his coat pocket, under the doormat of the janitor's closet, one folded delicately inside his lunch thermos, like a blessing meant only for steam and silence. He didn't keep them all. He returned some, pinning them near Willa's locker with a bit of gentle tape, as if to say, "I see you." Others he added to his box, now fuller than it had been in 5 years. The drawing she gave him on the first day of snow, a red top spinning inside a heart-shaped outline. He kept in his back pocket until it wore at the edges. One day, Willa left more than a picture. It was a folded letter. Uneven, crumpled, written in pencil, faint and halting. For the man with the mop, I like the way your top sings. Jack read in the boiler room, seated on an upturned bucket, the pipe beside him hissing softly like a sleeping dragon. He didn't cry. He just pressed the paper to his chest and sat very, very still. Evelyn heard about the letter from the art teacher, who found Willa humming faintly that afternoon while gluing buttons to cardboard. It was the first sound she'd made in months. Not speech, but music, real and raw in hers. Evelyn came to the school that night, long after the last student had left. She walked the dim hallway alone, heels echoing across tile, until she found the janitor's cart beside the supply closet. She knocked once. Jack opened the door slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth. He looked surprised to see her, but not unwelcome. "I heard she wrote you something," Evelyn said, her voice soft as snowfall. He nodded. "She did. She used to write me letters too," Evelyn added. "Little ones. Slipped under my door. I saved them in a box." Jack waited. "I stopped checking for them after her 7th birthday. Figured she'd outgrown it." Evelyn glanced away, ashamed of something unspoken. Turns out she hadn't. She just changed the recipient. Jack didn't feel the silence. He let it settle like good snow. "I'm not jealous," she said finally. "That would be ridiculous. I wouldn't blame you if you were." They shared a small, sad smile. In its quiet honesty, it felt like forgiveness. Evelyn sat on a crate beside him, eyes tracing the faded lines of the floor. "Why do you carry it with you?" she asked. "The top." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed it to her. She turned it in her palm, feeling the chipped edge, the weight. It looked like nothing. It felt like everything. It was Lila's. Jack said at last, "My daughter. I gave it to her when she was 6. She liked to spin it on the floor of her hospital room. Said it helped her think. Or dream. I don't know." Evelyn held it a little tighter. "She died in winter," he continued. "I used to spin it when I couldn't sleep. I think part of me believed if it stayed spinning long enough, she'd come back." The air in the closet grew still. "I never told anyone that," Jack whispered. "You just did," Evelyn replied. They sat like that for a long time. A man who had lost his daughter, and a woman still trying to find hers. Later that week, Jack returned to the art room and found a new letter. This one unfolded like wings. A single word written in red, crayon across it. "Spin." He stared at it for a long time. That afternoon, as Willa lingered in the hallway near the library, Jack crouched beside her. No words, just action. He placed the top on the tile and gave a flick. She didn't watch it. She watched him. Then, softly, as if pushing sound to a locked door, she whispered, "Spin." The world cracked open. He didn't show the tears. Not right away, but his breath hitched. His fingers trembled as he caught the top mid-turn and held it still in his palm. "Thank you," he said, voice hoarse. Willa nodded once, then turned and walked away. Evelyn stood behind the stairwell corner, hand over mouth, tears slipping past perfectly applied mascara. She had heard it too. That night, Willa curled up on the couch beside her mother for the first time in nearly a year. No iPad, no sensory blanket, just them. Evelyn read Charlotte's Web aloud, her voice breaking at every chapter, while Willa traced circles in the couch cushion. Midway through chapter 9, Willa looked up and whispered, "Don't stop." Evelyn dropped the book. She didn't pick it up for a full minute, just held her daughter and sobbed into her hair while Willa let her. The next morning, the school felt lighter. The staff smiled wider. The students laughed louder. Jack mopped the entryway with extra care, smoothing every corner. He bought a new string mop, a small splurge, but he wanted things to shine. Evelyn brought him coffee in a paper cup with a single line inked on the sleeve. "We don't always break when we bend." She handed it to him without a word. He looked at her, really looked, and said, "Would you like to sit for a while?" She nodded. They sat on the back bench behind the gym. Snow fell in soft spirals, catching in Evelyn's hair. She didn't brush it away. "I'm learning something," she said. "What's that?" "That grief doesn't leave. It just folds into the wallpaper, becomes the house." Jack nodded. "But sometimes we redecorate." She laughed. The sound surprised them both. He offered her the top. She turned it in her palm. "May I?" she asked. He nodded. Evelyn set it on the bench and gave a spin. It wobbled at first, but it righted itself. Just like her. Just like him. After she left, Jack opened the wooden box in his closet. Inside was something new, a paper crane, folded perfectly, red crayon along the wings. It was the only origami Willa had ever made. On one wing, Mom. On the other, Jack. Underneath, "I like how it feels when people stay." Jack folded it carefully, pressed it to his heart, and for the first time in 5 years, he whispered his daughter's name with joy instead of ache. "Lila," he said, and the top spun by itself. Or maybe the world finally started again. The snow had turned soft by Christmas Eve, falling in lazy spirals that caught the light like drifting ash. Jack's apartment sat on the second floor of an old brick building that creaked in the wind and smelled faintly of cedar and old vinyl. Inside, the air was warm, not from wealth, but from effort. A small heater pulsed beside the window. A pine-scented candle flickered on the table. And a modest Christmas tree, barely taller than Willa herself, stood proudly in the corner, adorned with handmade ornaments and a single red ribbon wound from bottom to top. Willa pressed her nose to the frosted glass, watching the snowfall with quiet reverence. She had insisted on hanging every ornament herself, each one a button, a feather, a shell tied with twine. Jack had let her. He'd only help when her small hands grew tired. Evelyn stood by the counter, her coat folded neatly on the back of a chair. She looked almost out of place in the simplicity of the space, yet something in her posture had softened. Her heels were off, her hair slightly undone, and for the first time since Jack had met her, she wasn't checking her watch or holding on to silence like armor. "This place feels lived in," she said. Jack glanced up from the pot of cocoa on the stove. "It is." She smiled. "Not wide, just enough to be real." Willa turned from the window and crossed the room barefoot, her red scarf trailing behind like a comet's tail. She sat cross-legged on the floor and reached into her small backpack, pulling out a piece of folded paper. Carefully, she opened it and slid it toward Jack. On the paper was a new drawing, the spinning top, placed between 3 stick figures. This time, all of them held hands. Jack's throat tightened. He nodded, gently smoothing the corners of the page before folding it back with reverence. "You kept them all?" Evelyn asked softly. He nodded. "They remind me..." "Of what?" "That nothing stays broken forever. Just long enough to become something new." Willa moved toward the tree and spun slowly in place, arms out like wings. Evelyn watched her, watched the curve of her arms, the light in her cheeks, the way her laughter, soft and barely audible, warmed the whole room like sunrise after a long storm. "I haven't heard that sound in a year," Evelyn whispered. Jack poured cocoa into mismatched mugs and handed one to her. She accepted it without breaking her gaze from her daughter. "She's not healed," Evelyn said. "Not all the way." "No one is," Jack replied, "but she's learning to breathe again." They stood in silence, sipping cocoa while Willa twirled and giggled, her movements light and unscripted. Later, they sat together on a rug, the 3 of them, as Jack opened a small box and revealed a single gift wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "For you," he said, offering it to Willa. She unwrapped it slowly, savoring the crinkle of the paper, to reveal a new spinning top. This one was crafted from cherry wood, polished smooth, with her initials etched along the bottom in silver ink. Her eyes widened. She looked at Jack, then Evelyn, then back to the top. "May I?" she asked. The room went still. Jack nodded. Willa set it gently on the floor and gave a spin. It twirled, faster than expected, catching the golden glow from the Christmas lights and scattering it across the walls. Her face lit with joy. Jack watched the top. Evelyn watched them both. "She used to remind me of glass," Evelyn murmured. "Delicate, Easy to break. Jack said nothing. But she's not, is she? She's just waiting to trust someone enough to help her shine. Jack looked at Evelyn. Really looked, past the sleek lines and quiet strength, into the weary tenderness she tried to hide. She trusted you first, he said. Evelyn blinked. No, she watched me. He smiled. That's how trust begins. The conversation drifted, like snowfall over candlelight. They spoke of small things, Willa's favorite animals, the best kind of soup, Jack's attempt at woodworking, Evelyn's hidden talent for sketching dresses she never wore. Every now and then, Willa would crawl into Jack's lap or lean against Evelyn's shoulder, completely at ease. It was not a holiday marked by glitter or noise, but it was sacred. When the cocoa was gone and the candle flickered low, Evelyn stood to retrieve a small box from her bag. She placed it in front of Jack, who hesitated. I didn't get you anything fancy, she said, but I thought maybe this would mean something. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a printed photograph, framed in dark walnut. The three of them standing in the school courtyard, Willa holding the original red top in her palm. Someone had caught it without them noticing. It was natural, honest. Below it, a handwritten note. Not everything that spins is lost. Sometimes it's just finding its rhythm. Jack cleared his throat, the emotion sitting like a stone. He could not move. Evelyn looked away, nervous suddenly. And I have one more thing. She pulled out a small envelope and handed it to him. He opened it slowly. Inside was a key. It's for a space I own. An old repair shop on Myrtle Avenue. Used to be a watchmaker's, then an upholsterer. It's been empty a long time. Jack looked up, startled. I thought maybe you want to fix things again. Or build. Or just have a place that's yours. His fingers closed over the key, not out of possession, but disbelief. Why would you give me that? Because you stayed, she said. They stood across from each other in the warm hush of the apartment, and the room felt smaller in the best way, like it had curled in around something sacred. Jack stepped closer. You didn't have to, he murmured. I wanted to. I don't know what to say. You don't need to. And then she reached up, brushed a strand of hair from his brow, and leaned in a quiet, slow movement, like the settling of snow on a sleeping rooftop. Their kiss was unhurried. No fire, no whirlwind. Just warmth. Just presence. Willa, watching from the couch, clapped once, then spun her new top again, as if blessing the moment with its gentle hum. The next morning, Evelyn walked Willa into school herself, no driver, no assistant. Jack was already there, mopping the main hallway, his sleeves rolled and a fresh bandage on his knuckle from a tool mishap the night before. Willa walked up to him, lifted her chin, and held out the top. Your turn, she said. Jack smiled, crouched, and spun it gently across the floor. Students paused to watch. A few teachers, too. The top spun, and Willa stood proudly beside it. Jack glanced up at Evelyn, who stood near the doorway with her arms crossed, the faintest mist in her eyes. Look at her, he said. I am, she whispered. The bell rang. Children scattered, but the top kept spinning. And so did they. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. These stories matter.